Hello and welcome to Computer Séance, a podcast featuring spirited discussion about AI and popular culture. I'm Justin.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Tracie.
Each episode, we take a seat at the table to conjure the spirits of AI past, present, and future, trying to find the meaning in the technological wonders imagined within popular fictions. All ideas presented in this podcast are understood to be the presenter's own. They do not reflect the thoughts, ideas, opinions, or positions of our employers, their programs, or their representatives. Tracie, this week you're taking us to 1987.
So, I've asked you to watch Cherry 2000. It's a 1987 sci-fi action film by Steve Jarnatt. It stars David Andrews as a businessman and android lover, Sam Treadwell, who's heartbroken when his android wife, Cherry 2000, played by the lovely Pamela Gidley, blows a fuse and destroys her synthetic body. And because Cherry 2000 model is no longer being produced in this sort of post-apocalyptic world in which the film is set, he seeks the advice and expertise of a renegade tracker, E. Johnson, played by Melanie Griffith, to seek out a new Cherry 2000 across the dangerous and lawless Zone 7 and install her memory chip inside of it. The movie explores Sam's journey to discovering that non-android women are also fun and worthwhile companions.
Novel.
So I want to talk about the start of the movie. Now, we don't know a lot about the situation that we're in. We see that Sam Treadwell lives in the city. He goes to work. He comes home to his android wife, Cherry 2000, who's always waiting to greet him with a smile on her face, a microwave meal, and plenty of love and affection. There's an interesting scene that I asked you to watch about this first interaction where Sam and Cherry are talking at the dinner table. And I wanted to ask you both, how do you feel about the way that Sam interacts with Cherry? What did you think about that first scene?
Well, I think Sam arrives home and he has some flowers behind his back, which Cherry remarks are pretty, I believe. And then there's a series of interactions that are very much her serving him and responding to him. So one of the things I picked out on it is all her dialogue. If it's not directly serving his needs in some way, it is always a response. So she doesn't initiate dialogue other than in service. Everything is somehow responding to something he says. And there's this point where he's describing something he learned that day, that rust is an electrochemical process, which is part of his job, sorting out extension leads or whatever he's doing. And it's quite strange. I wonder is that him trying to make chat he thinks an android will be interested in, but it prompts her into saying about something she learned that day.
I learned something today, too. What do these things have in common? Lightning rods, big Newton's escalators, ballpoint pens, and Vaseline.
Vaseline?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I get one.
They're all invented by Americans.
Who invented Vaseline?
Dessert?
So this is one of those moments, I think, well, at that stage in the film, you can't really tell how much Cherry knows about herself. Yeah. Like, does she know she's an android? Does she not? But this is a moment of some kind of realization, or that's how it reads. And she kind of walks away and seems upset or troubled. And Sam comes over to try and be comforting. He says his, "Are you okay?" line. Which
says, Cherry, what's wrong, honey?
And Cherry maybe is upset, but her response to this is just kiss me. You wonder what that means to her, right? So she can only say so many things or respond in so many ways. Maybe this means something else to her and her effective response to the extent she has that.
It's almost as if her programming is such that if she doesn't know the answer to a question, she reverts back to these acts of service or sexualization. Yeah. But what a horrible thought to think that she's aware of her shortcomings in a way, but can't do anything about them. Like she can't even improve herself somehow.
I think it's really significant that she can't eat or drink. So they can't, as a couple, and, in a way, they've been together a long time, I guess I'm reading in the film, but they can't eat together or, they have the drink together and they chink the glasses, but that's as much as they can do together. So they have this really limited, both in conversation and in sharing food, they have just a really limited set of possibilities for interacting.
And that's what I wanted to sort of comment on too in terms of that scene. There's a whole bunch of gender stylizations happening that we are watching develop. So how she puts her makeup on, the makeup is amazing. It's like so 80s and so delicious. And then you get him and he's such a dude. He's such an 80s dude.
This kind of brings us to one of the major first scenes in the start of the movie where Cherry 2000 and Sam, they start making out. And like Cherry had been doing the dishes after dinner because, of course, like as a perfect android wife, that's what she's doing. She does all the domestic work. And they start making out. And like, meanwhile, the sink in the background is just,
Weird sink.
It's got bubbles. Like, I don't know how much dish detergent that she is using, but there's like a considerable amount of bubbles happening where Cherry left the water on. And the whole kitchen, while they're making out, it like comically fills with bubbles. And they don't even notice because they're making out. And they have this really like sexy scene where Sam goes to flip Cherry on her back and then her head falls into the water, and that her head going into the water shorts out her body.
Which feels like a sex robot shouldn't be able to die from being wet.
Yeah.
Is the first thing. It's a major
Maybe that's why there's no more Cherry 2000 models.
Don't give it away yet.
Or is this their daily routine and this is the first time it went wrong?
Oh.
I hadn't considered
Ben
that.
coming in with a rational description. I like it. Yeah. I was more like, this is so implausible. Beautifully done. Implausibility.
It just happened so quickly at the start of the movie.
Yeah.
I also don't think I needed more input into what Sam's life with Cherry is like because it was so predictable as well. You know, there's this whole kind of growing trend of having AI girlfriends right now. And I think that's really relevant. Like everything you've just said is still very relevant to that whole kind of setup today, and that there will always be a group of people who are satisfied with like a unidirectional relationship with a machine in a way, you know? So, of course, Sam tries to see if he can go get her repaired. And I asked you to watch the scene where Sam meets this sleazy repairman and tries to sell him on some different models. One of the things that I noticed was that like one of the models looks like she's only about 14.
And she is the Bambi 14 model.
Right,
Explicit,
exactly.
yeah.
Oh, yes. I knew I got that number from 14
You were right,
from
yes.
somewhere. Okay, so it's very explicit then that she's a minor. I kind of forgot that. That's so gross. And Sam, he's not really interested in any of these models.
He says, Cherry or nothing.
He does. He says his love for Cherry is something, you know, different and more important and more singular. And he just vows to find himself another Cherry 2000 specifically. And he starts thinking about what to do. And here's where we get a little bit more insight into the world that we're living in the movie. He tells some sleazy colleagues at work about Cherry. I seem to like the word sleazy a lot.
I like it.
And they convince him to join them on a night out to try and get laid by some real women.
Quote unquote.
Yeah. We learn that the physical relationships between people have become very complex and somewhat litigious, I would say. Mostly blamed on women and how it's portrayed, you know. They visit this nightclub and all the men want to get laid and the women are having their lawyers review sex contracts, you know, like.
I think the men had lawyers too.
Yeah. I did get still the impression, though, that the men would kind of like do away with all the lawyer contracts if the women were into it, but they're not. And like, you know, you're imagining it's sort of like at the beginning of this nightclub, you're not even sure what kind of location it is because you go in and it looks like a brothel, but also maybe like a club where you meet just anybody for a potential like encounter, sexual or otherwise. It's sort of like a bar /
Well, and it has that beautiful door, which is a vagina.
What?
Do you remember?
No.
So it's called Glue Glue, the club. And then as they pan to Glue Glue, underneath it is moving doors that are vaginal lips. And it's gorgeous.
I can't believe I didn't notice.
Yeah. That's my note says, pussy door, sex contracts. So, you know.
I noticed that too.
The producers chiming in from the corner here. She saw
Like
that
a
too.
bad lesbian. Yeah, well, Sam isn't into it. And I wonder if there is some sort of like coding here. You know, he's offered a 14-year-old girl and he says no. He's offered, you know, like having sex with women under these like kind of complex situations and he says no. Are we supposed to think that Sam is like a better kind of guy. I don't know. Maybe that's not even like the point of this movie, but it was something that occurred to me.
I think it is important because, of course, the aim of the film is to recontextualize sex as a description, right? As an act within a future dystopia that would require a whole set of new protocols. And it imagines that you need to create a new body for men to have sex with, which is this robot body, right? So his performance of masculinity becomes really important for the whole premise to uphold. And that's why I said, like, he's such a dude, but he's also such a bad dude. Like, he's like, but Cherry or nothing. He's a wimp. I love it.
Is there anything about this vision of the future of dating? You know, like, where do you think this is? Do you see any signs of this breakdown? Is this a realistic scenario, or where does this fear come from? I guess there's a range of questions you could ask about that moment.
When we have the moment in the film where you have to sign a contract before you have sex, I actually was like, I'm into this. I'm totally into this. Like, it would be a kind of obvious limit test of sort of like capitalism to create contract law for all human interaction. And then who's keeping safe? That's the question there, right? And what is the safety? Is it to limit reproduction? Because the thing we don't get in this world building is any world.
No.
We get a flat plane of sort of like what we might call a Wild West dystopia, but we never have any actualization of what this world means in context beyond this relationship between men and women. And that's what it's boiled down to now in this terrifying 2017. But we don't actually get anything to give purchase to that.
There's also a thing with the contracts versus robotics, right?
Yes.
So the law or a contract is a way of making a human interaction a set of
Protocols.
So the sleazy guys, before they go to the club, talk about it as, you know, let's go meet some real women. But their ways of interacting are essentially in the same form, whoever they're interacting with, right?
Yeah, the
So
script
true.
stays the same, yeah.
Yeah.
During the sort of sleazy repair shop scene, but it also has echoes much later on with some characters we meet in the later parts of the film. So it's the word personality, which is used several times in the film. The personality is one of the things on the chip, and then that is placed into this body, and it's a kind of version of a mind-body split, right?
Right.
The repair shop guy attributes the body to have level of response and sensitivity, and the chip has basic memory, vocal patterns, reflex action, and personality. And so this sets up Sam to do these lines where he can seem like he cares for Cherry, right? He doesn't just want to put the chip in another body, and he also is not interested later on in the body without the chip. So he talks about, you know, when he thinks he's lost the chip later in the film, he says, well, that wipes out the whole deal, doesn't it? Getting a body without the chip would be like a toaster, right? So he's not, because he's just had, so he's not after.
If you put your cock in a toaster.
I was thinking the same thing.
But I think it plays off a dialogue with two other characters that we meet in the second half of the film. So this guy Lester, who is the sort of bad guy in the second half of the film, and a woman called Randa, who has only a few lines. But when we first meet Lester, his line to Randa, who he's in bed with at the time, is, I do like your personality, right? As she pulls him back into bed after taking a phone call. And then later on, she's actually trying to intervene in the plot in a particular scene where she's suggesting kind of ways forward and so on. And then she makes a remark about Lester's appearance because he's kind of been wounded in one of the action scenes. And he reacts to her violently and shoots her, saying, you need to work on your personality. So you have, I think, between that and the Sam use of it, you get this sense of the difference between personality and someone's personhood, maybe, and the way personality is reduced to another object-like thing, like the body. So it's an objectified thing about kind of compliance and servitude and response, but no agency.
Yeah, maybe more closer to the feeling like when your goldfish died as a kid and someone would just try to take a new goldfish and put it in the bowl. Like, yeah.
Cherry or nothing.
Cherry or nothing. So can I just ask you about the world that we're in, right? We have very advanced technology because of the existence of Cherry, but there are also signs of economic breakdown. Like there's a different currency that's appeared in the movie. There's these zones that occur outside of the city. At the beginning, I said that they go to Zone 7 to look for Cherry, but there's other zones that seem to be run by maybe small militias or gangs. And there's a social breakdown. You really don't see women doing much of anything in the movie, I realized. You know, they kind of don't really have a big part in the economy. At least I don't recall seeing them around very much. What do you think? Did you have any thoughts about what might have happened to lead to that situation, or where you've got like really advanced technology, but such a breakdown in the social order?
So we have an economy based on recycling. I think that's the biggest clue. It reminded me a little bit, especially with the sort of Wild West references that are early in the film, of the Chrysalids. So that's a kind of post-nuclear war novel. And you have a kind of frontier, American frontier reclaiming the lost lands after some kind of apocalypse. So it kind of reminded me a little of that.
It felt Tank Girly to me, but without the kind of fun.
Yeah. And that's actually a good segue into there's this little point in the middle, right? So Sam gets a tip that someone might have a Cherry 2000, but it's outside of the city. Mm-hmm. And we learn that outside of the city, there are gangs and it's dangerous, and that Sam's going to need help. And he tries to find this famous tracker who's got the name Six-Fingered Jake. And he's unable to find him, but he has an associate, and that person's name is E. Johnson. And when Sam meets E. Johnson and finds out that she's actually a woman, he nearly gets assaulted, or worse, trying to find a replacement for her. He so much does not want to work with this woman that he gets beat up. And then he runs into some other bad guys who want to take Cherry's memory chip for their leader, Lester. We find out that Lester is one of the gang leaders that's out in the zones. Sam escapes and eventually goes back to E, the tracker E, with Lester's guys already kind of after them. And after this, the movie definitely takes this Mad Max kind of turn. Their journey across Zone 7 is just fraught with conflict.
But they have plenty of petrol and ammunition.
They do. They have enormous weaponry, like rocket launchers and seemingly endless ammunition.
And seemingly endless gas. They can just keep, everyone has cars. They're still driving these shitty Chevrolets.
That's true. They have enormous weapons. They're blowing up the sides of mountains. Do you remember the scene where they literally blow up an entire mountain?
That's amazing.
After they're rescued from Lester's people, they trying to get into the zone, Sam learns that E is actually associated with Jake. Jake's her uncle. So Six-Fingered Jake, the tracker, is E's uncle. And they kind of continue their journey with Jake's help. And they keep kind of running into Lester's gang. And Sam is kidnapped by this community living out in the desert that's associated with Lester. He's got no idea initially what happened to E or Jake, but he realizes that one of the women on the complex is his ex-girlfriend, who's the current partner, presumably, of Lester. And the Sky Ranch, Ben, describe the Sky Ranch for us. What does it look like?
So I think it's, we're at a pool. There's a lot of people sitting around there, sunbathing. We have a bunch of people in kind of floral shirts, I guess, in this gang, and quite natty hats. There's a lot of weaponry. None of them can shoot straight, though, so I don't know if they practice anything. It feels like a really odd thing to happen as part of this apocalyptic situation,
really?
But I can kind of also imagine it, right? This is it's Mad Max biker gang, but Las Vegas pool party.
Okay, so while they're at the Sky Ranch, E comes to save him. They escape out of the commune and they fly to a warehouse where they've heard that there's possibly a model of Cherry 2000. And meanwhile, despite him being a complete and total douche, E is falling for Sam. And you get the sense that she's finding this search for his android mate a bit tiring. But they do find a new Cherry 2000 in the warehouse. And when Treadwell puts Cherry's memory chip in the new android body, and they spends 5 minutes making out with her right in front of E, she's feeling pretty crappy. Is making out with Cherry the whole time. Lester, meanwhile, is hot on their trail. So she gets into the plane, and they all get into the plane, and they manage the successful escape with the newly discovered Cherry 2000 model, only to discover that the plane is too heavy with 3 people in the cabin.
Because robots are heavy.
Because robots are fucking heavy. And so E decides to sacrifice herself and throws herself out of the plane so that she can just finish the job for Sam. And he flies off with Cherry, who's just kind of coming along for the ride. Do you remember some of the lines that Cherry says?
So Cherry she doesn't really understand what's going on. She's just, who are these people shooting at us? And has to be guided to run and to duck and so on. So she's just kind of unaware of the situation. And they get to the plane and they're flying away. And then she tells Sam maybe a couple of times, I love you.
Yeah.
And I think that's the moment that I think we're supposed to read Sam coming to this realization that, what does he say at the end? She's a robot, right?
Yeah.
Like up to this point, he hasn't acted that way. And then we're supposed to read him as sort of discovering this when he has to make a choice, I guess.
You can sense that in the moment, and that kind of her saying "I love you" those 2 times is very reminiscent to that first scene when we meet them, right? Where she doesn't know what to say, so she just moves into what are the things I can say that can make him love me / want to have sex with me. I love you / kiss me, right?
I'm interacting with you now.
She's like, they're under fire, right? They're under fire. And like E and Sam are both like, well, they're in the moment together.
Yeah.
And Cherry's sort of like in her own moment. I think at one point she's like laying on her stomach like she's at a sleepover, kicking up her legs behind her. And it's almost childlike.
That's right.
And like the material situation that they're in, the fact that people are shooting at them and that they could die, it's not an experience, like an embodied experience that Cherry shares.
In terms of the acting in the film, that was my favorite sequence. So like that, how Cherry like conveys that feeling through those scenes, I thought was really interesting.
Also, as an actress, having to just to be like, for half the film, she just is like a face that's asleep. It's so beautiful.
And her voice is very like, oh, kiss me.
Mm-hmm.
It's very
dreamy.
So E has sacrificed herself. She's jumped out of the plane. Treadwell's like flying off with Cherry. And then he's like, I can't just leave E back there. So he comes back. He takes the plane. He comes back for E, who's now fighting some serious gunfire from Lester. And he tells Cherry to get out of the plane. And he says to her, as a way of maybe getting her to leave the situation, he says, Cherry, like they're out in the middle of nowhere. He says, Cherry, go get me a Pepsi. And then he just picks up E and flies off with her. And then we have the scene with...
Go get me a Pepsi.
And then he says to E, she's just a robot, right? And that's his complete dismissal of Cherry. And I think that's really horrible, that whole sequence. But then Cherry ends up meeting Ginger, Sam's ex-girlfriend, and they have this little moment at the end, and Lester's dead, and they're sitting together, and Ginger has these sandwiches she's been carrying around for the 3rd act, and she shares them with Cherry, and Cherry opens up the sandwich because she doesn't eat anything, right? But she opens it up and says, oh, pretty, which is like the scene at the beginning when she receives the flowers from Sam. And I kind of think it's interesting they find each other because they're a kind of interesting pair of characters in a way, and I was hoping if they ever do a sequel to this film, we would see a kind of road trip between Cherry and Ginger and possibly, having some character growth and a narrative arc and so on.
I think it's interesting because they're both experiencers of misogyny.
Yes.
Experienced in different ways. And I think in that first scene where she looks disappointed when she doesn't know the answer to Sam's question, there's a little bit of a reaction to that misogyny already then. Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting that, like, android or not, the misogyny is the problem. There have been lots of studies about how the way we treat female-coded robots or language models or whatever, even Siri, that can have an impact on how we treat people who present in the same way in the real world. And I think that's an interesting aspect of this movie, maybe.
It reminded me how things like ships and complex machines and things like this are often been gendered female, which again comes back to agency, I think.
Yeah.
And this whole idea of, what would be the purpose for robots having bodies? Because our bodies are very specific to us and our needs and whatever. There's no need for robots to have like a human body unless you want them to provide human related services for you, When I asked you in watching this movie to compare it with a trailer with another film called Virtuosity. I think that one's from 1995.
That's right.
And it takes place at a time where there's very advanced technology again. There's this sort of cop turned prisoner after having murdered somebody who killed his wife and daughter, who's played by Denzel Washington, fighting an AI played by Russell Crowe, who's been trained on serial killer data and manages to find himself inside a body.
Enfleshed,
yeah. And Denzel fighting him, going on a killing spree. So Russell Crowe's character in the movie, the way he gets his body is because they have another AI that's like a porn actress, and they have a guy who's making synthetic bodies, and they're like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we put our porn AI into your synthetic body? And then at the very last minute, they switch the AI chip that goes into this body with the one of this sadistic serial killer AI.
Mm.
And I just wanted to know, like, what were some of the reflections when you look at these two ideas of robots having bodies?
Yeah, I think it comes back to what I think about so much with Cherry 2000 is it's this question of a patriarchal society jettisoned into a speculative future, environmentally destroyed, that is still dealing with patriarchal assumptions around the female body and its role in service or partnership. And so both films seem to ask a question about what are the limits of partnership between human and machine? And what are the ethical, moral, and affective dimensions? So that's the other thing that's interesting about the film. This is 2017. This is the 2017 future. What they can imagine is Chryslers and sex bots. Chrysler and sex bots in the outback, the Wild West. You know what I mean? The limits of our imagination within patriarchal structures, within the way we understand technology and our socio-technical engagements are really sort of depressing.
Mm. Yeah.
I thought the Virtuosity trailer had a lot of male energy, let's say. One man has been recruited and he's in the real world. And so Russell Crowe just has a lot of agency in driving the plot, it seems, in a way that Cherry has none, or has that taken from her.
I think it's interesting that they're both from a similar time and they both envision different capabilities for AI. Cherry is maybe because they don't think she needs to have any of these other kind of characteristics. Like her personality is very simplified, very childlike, very subservient. Whereas Russell Crowe's character, which has been created to train police, and they're using prison labor still in this envisioned world to train this AI, which I think is this juxtaposition of having a world that's falling apart and advanced technology is for me like so weird, you know? But his character has like everything. It has like 15 people's personalities inside of him. And he does very creative and disturbing things. Like at one point he goes into a nightclub and he murders everybody, or like, I think he injures at least everybody in there, and then starts like using the MIDI controller basically to make an orchestra piece of music out of all their screams. It's a very wild scene. I really encourage you both to watch it because I've never seen anything like it. But I just couldn't help but think that these two different ways of thinking about what AI will do for us and what kind of personality they will have and how complex they will be, I thought it was interesting.
I'm going to ask the composer for the music for this podcast to please make a MIDI controller of screams for us.
Is there anything else that we did not talk about that you want to bring up before we wrap up?
Okay, so I have a thought, which is that actually Cherry wanted to die.
Ooh, that's our producer, Kat McShane, actually coming in hot with a fresh take. Let's hear it, Kat.
There's a series of clues at the start, the first of which was that when she's presented with a bunch of flowers, she throws half of them away.
I thought that was wasn't that the old flowers?
That's the old flower.
Yeah, and they're fake flowers. That's important.
Well, bear with me because there may be other clues.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very annoying. But then, so she's sitting there and she's given him the dinner and she can't drink the red wine. And then he poses that question about who made Vaseline and she looks really upset. I think there's a sense of dissatisfaction in the relationship. But the ultimate clue for me is that the act of having sex with him surrounded by water, still wearing her washing up gloves, was that she knew that would kill her. And then it was a final kamikaze act of suicide.
A Sylvia Plath. Yeah.
It explains the sink. It's the only thing.
Does.
It does explain the sink.
She leaves the water running.
And she wouldn't do that. So my read.
Why that night?
Well, no, this is the thing.
good.
So it's also really beautiful if this is how they actually envisioned it, or the fake flowers really are meaningful there because, right? She takes this fake thing, throws it away, and replaces it with a new fake thing, which is what he's going to do with her.
Ooh,
body,
foreshadowing.
right? And you could be right that she knows that this is it. She's actually running down. And that moment where she can't respond with the answer is actually an indicator that her operating system's going. The mechanical failure is coming. And actually why she short circuits is because of this mechanical failure. That's a really interesting read.
Or she turns her head right to the water. I have to go
Yeah.
back and watch, but it's possible that she turns her head right to the water. And surely she would know if she wasn't able
Also,
to get
sex
wet.
robot, you're going to have some wetness and some sex. Am I wrong?
Maybe not a kitchen full of bubbles.
But that also does just explain why she left the sink on, because that would have helped. So she knows she's going. She might as well go out and wet style.
I think one is more knowledgeable than the other. One is she was running down. That
Yes.
was my first thought when she couldn't think of an answer to
Yes.
the Vaseline question. Like, she's going to short circuit, whatever. The one I prefer is that she was like, fuck this. Going to keep the taps going. Going to drown us. I'm out of here.
That's a really hot take, Kat. I love it.
Okay, that's what I'm here for.
Thank you for watching this film with me, Cherry 2000.
It was a trip. I loved it.
And thank you to the audience for listening to us talk.
Yeah, thanks
trash.
for listening to our lovely podcast. And we'll see you soon.
Don't miss any of our conversations about popular culture and AI. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and be sure to leave us a review. This podcast is funded by UK Research and Innovation Future Leaders Fellowship.